Every who down in Who Newville liked the holidays a ton, but where to get great prices on gifts they had no idea. None. They searched and they searched for great gifts under $25. Gifts for spouses and friends and even their toddlers. When suddenly one who shouted, Walmart has what you want, knowing they have Lego, Tree Hut, and low prices to flaunt. So they enjoy the holiday season as who's often do. Cheering and shouting, Walmart has incredible gifts. Who knew? Find gifts they'll love under $25 at Walmart.
There is no hood like parenthood. Hi, I'm Kanika Chadda Gupta. I'm a former CNN journalist, mom of 3, including twins, and host of That's Total Mom Sense, the podcast. Now, if I had $1 every time I heard, gee, you have your hands full. On my show, I interview change makers on their life lessons, legacy, and superpower of intuition, which I call our Mom Sense and Dad Sense. I've had the privilege of working with Mom 2.0, March of Dimes, and the White House, and have had some pretty amazing parents on my show.
Hey, what's up? I'm Kelly Rowland.
Hi, this is Chelsea Clinton.
It's me, Bobby Brown. Can't wait to share my story.
That's Total Mom Sense is a production of the Evergreen Podcast Network. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube so you never miss an episode. To join my tribe, visit that'stotalmomsense.com and follow me on Instagram at Kanika Chadda Gupta. Now let's dive into today's episode. Today is a very special day. I am honored to be sitting with the powerhouse, GABBY REECE. From dominating the volleyball court to pioneering the world of fitness and wellness, GABBY has done it all as she's raising a family and has co-founded businesses. She is a world-renowned athlete, model, entrepreneur, author, podcast host, wife, and mom. From growing up in the Virgin Islands to raising her family in sunny California, GABBY has lived a life of resilience, determination, and grace. She has taken the lessons learned from her career in sports and applied them to her daily life. So we will be nosediving into her childhood, career, relationships, and parenting journey in this volleyball-themed interview. GABBY, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I always love the introductions when you've lived long enough, they just get longer, right?
Yes. Soak it in. You have a lot of accolades. I mentioned offline, but I've been a fan ever since you were Nike's first female spokesperson. So I've seen you then, and to be able to, interview you and share this moment with you now is like a full circle moment.
Well, listen, one thing I have learned over the years is we're all connected. So, it's really my honor. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. So as I mentioned, we're going to have a fun volley and exchange back and forth. And so let's jump right into our game.
Okay, I'm ready.
Starting with the warm up. And that is about your childhood. So I'd love for you to give us your first serve and set the stage of your childhood.
My father's from Trinidad and my mother's from New York. They met in California. I think that they had probably a whirlwind type of romance. I was probably unexpected, even though nobody will confess that. And then from when I was around 2, I was living in Mexico City with my mother. She was training dolphins at a circus. And I got whooping cough, and my mom called a neighborhood friend. She's from Long Island. And eventually what ended up happening is, because it was decided it was probably better for me, from age 2 to 7, I lived with this couple in Long Island, New York. And I was not with either one of my parents. And my father actually passed away during that time when I was quite young, like 5, in a plane crash. And I was raised by, I called them my aunt and uncle, my aunt and Uncle Joe. And they were, very loving, very, in some ways, tough on me. They lived a very hardworking, get it done life. And then when I was 7, my mom had remarried and I moved down to the Virgin Islands. And I was raised in the Virgin Islands till my junior year of high school. And I often say I was kind of rudderless, and they were not together any longer either. And actually, I still know my stepfather today, and so it's many years later. He was quite loving, but my mom moved me to Florida, And so I went to a Christian school in St. Petersburg, Florida. I was quite tall. I was 6'3" at, 15 years old. And so when I walked into this tiny little school where if you had athletic prowess, for the most part, you went to a bigger school.
Yeah.
And I had played a little bit of volleyball in the Virgin Islands, but really got really serious about volleyball and basketball. I had great coaches. And unbeknownst to me, after high school, I was 17, I had gotten several offers for sports, and I went to Florida State on a scholarship. And and if I tell you, within 20 months of like when I left the Caribbean to that moment, it was very unexpected. I had a really important person, my coach in college, Cecile Renaud, who helped me develop as a person and as an athlete, and really made me fall in love with the sport. And during that time, I started modeling so I could kind of pay the other bills. So, they pay your
Mhm.
books and all these things, but I was pretty much on my own. And so after my freshman year, I started modeling.
Firstly, I just want to say sorry that you had to deal with such tragedy so young. I have a dear friend, Shannon Lee, who's the daughter of Bruce Lee.
Mhm.
Um, she lost her father when she was 4. And I think there's something so pivotal about that. Like all of a sudden, you become this adult child who's, had to deal with the weight of life's problems with something like that happening to you. Um, and so I'm just curious how you um, move through
Mhm.
life with that because it's traumatic.
I'll be honest. What was in a different way for different reasons that I can articulate. It was much more difficult that I was not living with one of my parents when I was 2.
Mm,
And because my dad wasn't a come home every day dad, because I wasn't living with them, that came over a phone call about my father's passing. So there was sort of, that idea was a little more abstract.
yeah.
My dad would come and visit here and there, but at that time, my parents were not particularly present in my life. And so I will say that, there's some tragedy in that it wouldn't impact me the same as if I was a child whose dad was sort of part of the everyday life.
Right.
So some of the harder stuff might have been before that. And the other thing, and I've talked to people about this before, is as I've gotten older, I've thought about all the ways, and I don't mean this in a harsh way, but that what came out of my dad's passing that was actually positive. And what always comes back for me is, one, maybe there was some negligence on my parents' part in the way that they did the best they could.
Hmm.
And I don't think my dad was allowed to sort of be in custody of me, but if I look back at my young mother, she probably did the best she could, right? But
Yeah.
that my dad dies, and you're a hero, right? That's number one. And number two, there might be sort of some data suggesting that women oftentimes become kind of the male for themselves if they lose
Mhm.
their father. And if I trace back all the things that I have had the real opportunity to do in luxury, I've used a lot of male energy to do that.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I think about it as that was my dad's path. Maybe he wouldn't have been happy as a much older person. Like there's all these things we can sort of focus on and say, well, maybe there was something positive that came out of that. So that obviously took a couple years. But as far as the initial of him passing, it wasn't quite as jarring, let's say, as another person might have gone through.
Yes, yes, no, that makes so much sense. For anyone who's listening, we all have something in our childhood that we want to course correct um, in the present day. And, we can go back and reparent ourselves. So tell us about that and, who 7-year-old Gabby was and what she cared about and what she dreamt of.
Yes, so Dr. Schwartz is a very quiet man. And so when I was doing the interview, I was trying, because his message is powerful, but sometimes I found his delivery to be quiet. Unless maybe you were in a session, how do you make that deep and exciting maybe for the listener.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he said, "Well, do you want to try an exercise?" I thought, "Okay, you know what? Let's do that." And I'm
Yeah.
not particularly so eager to bathe in self-pity or things like that, but I think it's important to, if you're going to do something like that, just be honest. So he said, "Okay, go back to a time." And for whatever reason, we kind of all fall into whatever time we need to. And at 7 is when I moved away from my aunt and uncle Joe and back with my mother. And it was a very, very stressful time for me. I didn't feel secure. I didn't feel like somebody was like deeply in charge. And I think young children really look for that. Somebody said they want you to be like a boat captain. They don't want you to be in control, but they want you to be in charge. And I didn't feel like somebody was in charge, let's say. And so I went back to that time, and he just asked me a series of questions. And so I thought, if I'm going to do this, I should be honest, because otherwise it's just wasting people's time. And I could see myself, and I knew exactly where I was located. And then he even said, like, "Do you want her to go with you?" And I was like, "No, I just wanted to get her out of that location and out of that house." But from the time I was 18 or 19, even though I was working really, really hard, my life was pretty good. And how could I get myself up to speed with where I am at this moment versus where I have been and where I was? Because that time doesn't exist anymore. That person doesn't exist. Those problems, a lot of them don't exist. The only reason they exist is because I keep them alive. And there's hardwiring. The brain is working a certain way. If you're hyper vigilant or something's happened, or if people have had real trauma, I don't even look at what I went through as a real trauma. I look at it as sort of like an inconvenience and an opportunity to learn a lot. I'm talking about, people who've been really hurt in a physical way and emotional way. How do we transcend that wiring and move into, as a friend of mine said, the miracle that is your life today?
Ah,
And so for me, I was always wired to say, yeah, well, what's good about what's happening and how do we get on? And I think the last part that I really had to work on was that hard wiring in my brain, because you're always going to bump up against that until you can find ways to kind of pull that thread.
yeah, totally. I love that you find the upside. Um, and you had mentioned that like a place that gave you calm is the beach. What do you feel when you're there? Just, feeling the sand under your feet and the water, because that plays out throughout your life, which we'll get to. But I just think that's so cool that you know that gives you that solace.
I think nature is honest. And even though I know it's at times harsh, there's just, there's no, I don't want to say surprises, but there's wonder and magic. And I also feel, whether we realize it or not, especially at a young age, it does connect us to a source. And, if people want to say God or creator or whatever our people's languages, I honor that. I think when you're there, also you felt, even though you're small, you still felt seen. And that there was something greater happening, which then gave me hope of, hey, listen, this thing you're going through is temporary. And even though those are the parents that you've chosen and this is the situation you're in, there's something bigger happening. And that always gave me, and I may not have had the words for it, it always gave me this faith that I was seen and something about it was going to work out.
Mm, yeah. Wow. I think that's beautiful. And that's something that you want to tide you through every season of life, you know,
Yeah.
um, especially as we get older.
But I also, I want to recognize, because I'm obviously still learning quite a bit. I just went to an event where the people were very creative and artistic, and there was a part of them were talking about holding on, or that little girl being inside and her showing up in these environments. Like, my tendency is not to do that. My tendency is like, hey, let's let her go. And I want to recognize that maybe other people use that as a source of comfort or uh, motivation or acknowledgement. So that's the other part of this, is that there's kind of a lot of ways to do it.
Yeah. So true. So true. Whatever is healing for you. Um, Now, if we skip ahead to your teenage years, I mean, I feel like you were in middle school when you hit 6 foot,
Yeah.
which is incredible. And how did you like, navigate school and like school years um, during that time? Because I know you played basketball and then later volleyball.
Yeah. So it's every kid, you probably were because you were culturally maybe different or you were, a brown girl. Like who knows, right? All the things, but everybody has a thing. Somebody's like my ears were
Totally.
big and somebody's like I had a stutter. Just I get it. So mine was I was just unusually tall. So 6 feet at 12. Luckily, I graduated at 17, so I was also kind of young in a higher grade, so I sort of could get through that quicker because a lot of the kids were at least a year or a year and a half older than myself. But it was a great, it was hard and such an important training ground for me because the idea of fitting in was never going to happen. And because I do have this internal mechanism of I'm not going to bang my head against the wall, that even though I yearned to a little bit, I found the way to sort of realize like that's not going to happen. So you're going to have to let go of that.
Right. Right. Wow. And then tell us about your foray into volleyball and that too competitively.
So again, I kind of stumbled. I always say from high school into college, and college is where I learned to become a good player.
Yeah,
And
Florida State.
yeah, I went to Florida State, and again, I was late to the game, so I had a lot of enthusiasm for it. So I um, I moved to Miami after I graduated from Florida State because I had been living between New York and Tallahassee. I was modeling and playing ball and modeling and playing ball. And finally, I didn't really want to live in New York full time. So when I finished playing, I went down to Miami, which is where I picked up the beach game. And and then after about a year or so, year and a half, a woman there was like, you should really move to California and try to pursue this. So again, a lot of this was unmapped, but what I did do during the entire time was I didn't abandon the things that I really enjoyed doing, which was certainly playing volleyball and being that person in that environment. I always looked at fashion as a job and a really unbelievable privilege and opportunity. But a lot of people encouraged me to dive fully into that. I understood the limitations, one being my size, even though I had a very good career. And two, I felt more of who I was in that box on that court. I didn't know it was going to lead me to being a professional, but the important thing was that I followed the thing that I enjoyed, and lo and behold, it certainly led me somewhere else.
Yes, yes. And how did you develop like a sense of mental like willpower and focus and discipline? Because that's really what it takes to like be on top.
As somebody who has three daughters, one thing I have learned in spades is we are born with a lot of things that the environment could impact in a good or a bad way. But I would love to say that there are certain traits I have that I developed or I figured out. I've sharpened them a bit. I've
Mhm.
polished them, but I think I have a lot of traits that are natural to me. I think, in fact, I sort of have this desire for order around me. I do once I'm locked in. I'm a very disciplined person. So there's certain traits that I think they just go along with my personality. But the key is also not to be brought down by those traits. So in fact, learning to be flexible and not trying to will everything. And so actually I've also had to work on the opposite of that as a person, as a partner, as a parent. And so I think it was a lot of this was natural. It was just kind of honing it in.
Yeah, sure. Research shows that over 70% of women who play sports in their youth believe it has a positive impact on their careers and their lives.
Mhm.
So how has this, worked out for you? Like, do you feel the same that it kind of sets you up?
Well, I often say I just saw Billie Jean King this weekend, and I've known her for many, many years. And it's like there's people who played for fun and they were good at it and they like to win. And I say I feel the same way, but volleyball in a different kind of way really saved my life. It gave me a track to put my train on and go in this line that was already kind of fixed for me. And along that path and that way, I sort of got to develop skills and perspectives and meet people. Sports, obviously, even the fact that you can learn to be criticized and that you're not afraid to go, I don't know how to do that, or I'm not good at that. And you know how to work on it. I think sometimes people get locked into thinking they're supposed to know. They're afraid to look silly. I've lost in front of lots and lots of people. I've humiliated myself. I'm still here. It's like all of these things that are just really important tools for whether you're going to go into work or relationships in your personal life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's great that you've used that as really a springboard for all that you've gone on to do in your life. So tell us about, the businesses you founded and your podcast and even, High X. I love that you have your very own signature workout series and program.
Well, sports just taught me hard work, teamwork, success and failure, how to win and lose, how to set goals, how to even recognize if something isn't working, how to ask for help, how to find the right help. Or
Mm,
coaching, right? There's all these things. So out of that,
yeah,
when you play a sport like beach volleyball, it's a small sport, and by nature, you almost become a hustler, like an entrepreneur. For me, it
yeah,
interpreted as an entrepreneur. I have other friends that played that they would start their own businesses or be teachers or do other things. For me, it was entrepreneurship, and so a natural extension going back to who am I? What do I like? Not for real, not just looking at the landscape and going, what's my next move? That's
yeah.
not for me. That wasn't the way to do it. The way to do it was to really ask myself, where do you think you want to be in a year and 3 and in 5? What does that look like? And keep asking that question because then I think the path sort of reveals itself. And one of the ways it did that was in health and fitness, in business, and it didn't hurt that I met my husband when I was 25. He also was an athlete, and I will say, in your 20s, you work for other companies. You're endorsing them. You're with Nike or whoever, and then in your 30s, you understand pretty quickly, hey, this has a limitation in time. So that's when you need to start asking, like, hey, where should I go next? Where do I want to go next? And then that led me to certain businesses that didn't work. And then finally, we have a fitness business, XPT, which has a breathing app. It'll have locations. Our pool training falls under this. And this is sort of a really special kind of niche training that is great for people. Let's say I have MBA guys who come here. They can do in a session a couple hundred jumps, but they don't pound their joints. There's just a lot of variables. So that's XPT. We have Laird Superfood, which is a coffee and creamer business. Food business, again, happened organically out of a habit that my husband Laird was doing in the house. And that sort of drifted us into this opportunity to create this business, which actually is probably our most successful. And then High X, born out of community service. So High X is a workout that when I lived on Kauai half the year, they didn't really have a lot of places to work out. I invite 8 of my friends. I'd say, okay, I rent out the community center. I'll bring the equipment. You can come. Before you know it, it's anywhere from 80 to 100 people in a warehouse together that I charged $1 so that they could be on my insurance. But what it did is it gave me a classroom. And so I use that as a way to go, okay, when it comes to fitness, not only is there a lot of ways to get it done, there's definitely not one way. But what you hear is people say, I have no time. Okay. I don't know what to do. I'm intimidated to lift weights. I'm bored. And so I thought, okay, what are all the ways that we can answer those questions? And so High X was one of those ways. You're on a team. I write the workout. It's different each time, so you can keep making progress. You're lifting weights, but you're working in cardio. You're doing proprioception and balance, kind of the elements, some of the fundamentals that are important. And how do we put that together, work super hard, help each other, and then go on with our days? And so High X really, again, was a natural extension of me going, hey, I can do this for my community. And it's a great workout. I still do it myself 3 days a week. And I appreciate that. One thing I do want to say about fitness, though, it's super important, is that there is no one right way. And I want to always encourage people to find out what it is that they like enough or can bear and do, and a diversity of things to get it done, because that's more important than, one person saying, do this and it'll fix everything. It's not the way it works.
Yeah, true. No, absolutely. It's the only thing that you're going to actually feel like sticking to. And now a word from our sponsors. For busy parents, coffee is our fuel. Now, if only we could get more from our mug and avoid a caffeine crash. Thank goodness for Laird Superfood. It's the brainchild of pro surfer Laird Hamilton and his wife, volleyball super athlete and model Gabby REECE. I loved having Gabby on the podcast to discuss all things parenting, what it takes to be disciplined and instill that in our kids, and creating routines for ourselves that we can actually stick to. Laird Superfood has a line of instant lattes rooted in mushroom blends, pun intended, for those on the go. They use clean ingredients and good fats like MCT oil. My favorite is the sweet and creamy. For the holiday season, they've launched the Peppermint Mocha. It's just 160 calories, 9 grams of coconut sugar, and is under $3. In comparison, coffee shop lattes are over 440 calories, 54 grams of sugar, and is over $6. Be sure to try their other flavors too. Gabby and Laird are professional athletes and are especially mindful of how they train their bodies. Have you seen them do weights at the bottom of a pool? So if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for us. Use my code MOMSENSE20 for 20% off your first order at lairdsuperfood.com. This is a great way to start the new year. If you're going to do something every day, make it better, starting with your first cup. I know you've written over 1,200 workouts, which is insane and amazing. And on your Instagram, I saw a video of you and your husband Laird walking with weights in your hands at the bottom of a pool, which is like just so badass. I can't even imagine.
Well, and it's also a way with water, you get to know yourself in a new way. And because even my thoughts and the width of my eyes and how much tension I have underneath burns oxygen. So when people go, oh, relax or do this, you really see from an objective environment, where are you at? And I really appreciate that, because sometimes I think, as fair as human beings try to be, to have an objective environment, which is water, let you know what you're up to. It's like, oh, this is just feedback. And what I also want to remind, especially your audience, is it doesn't have to be hours and hours. It doesn't have to be fancy. If actually you could just be consistent in the long run, if you say, hey, I only have 15, I have 12 minutes, I have a new baby, I have a young baby, whatever it is, that's actually in the long run going to be more supportive and more powerful than trying to figure out that everything has to be elaborate and complex and for hours and hours.
I do just a really quick workout, and I make sure that I jump. I remember my husband asking some friends, like, when was the last time you jumped? And I mean, when you're in the sand playing volleyball, or if you're a kid, it's like, earlier in the day. But as adults, we forget to do that. So I did that. And this is a TMI bit. I'll do like squats in the shower, which is just to get it out of the way. And I'm like, okay, I knocked out 50, and now I'm going to blow dry my hair.
Well, you have to, you in particular have to do it in the shower, because you've had 3 children of close age, and sort of, I always joke that the only place I could have like a moment of privacy when my kids were little was like, I used to say, hey, long showers. And for me, I use the shower as the internal check-in. How's it going? How do I feel? How's my relationship? What's going on with the kids? Do I need to talk to anyone? Just what am I scared about? Am I edgy? Am I worried about something? So I think it's the perfect place because it's like the one place everyone will maybe leave you alone for a
Leave
few
you
minutes.
alone. It's so true. That's so true. You've really seen your success in a team sport, and that's really unique, and it's a completely different experience. In volleyball, you've got your front row and your back row. And
Mhm.
so in your front row, who are those people for you? And in your back row, who's back there backing you up too?
It's funny because if you say literally the back row is the crew that's actually making it kind of really happen on the kind of foundational level, but they don't get the credit. So
Yeah.
it's like the person who digs that very hard hit or passes that perfect serve so that you can run the offense. And so a lot of times in a business, the back row is the group that's doing some of this really arduous heavy lifting that is not, it's not the sizzly part where people are getting, that attention. And
Glory.
so,
Yeah.
yeah. And the front row, I think if you're smart, you know who's really also helping it make it happen. And the front row is, it's a big block or it's a big hit. It's sort of dynamic. Everybody goes, yay. But you understand without that first part, you can't do your job. I've learned to, recognize the importance of everybody's role. And I think the back row, so for your case, maybe it would be like a producer or, something.
Mhm.
If they feel like the front row understands, acknowledges, and appreciates, I think that's all they really want. Because a lot of times you see them there as somebody who takes pride in what they do, and that's why they're doing it.
So true. That's so true. I'm with you. When you choose a life partner, I feel like it's the biggest make or break decision of your life. And who you choose to build a family with, like it's really like pivotal. Um, so if you could tell us a bit about like your relationship and why it is such a supportive one.
I wish I could say I was smart enough to know at 25 that I was making a really not only important choice, like more important than I realized at that time, um, but that I was making a good choice for myself.
Yeah.
But I think what it does is it goes back to that I had the opportunity to listen to my instinct, and it worked out a few times. It worked out for me professionally and personally. And so because I kept in that, when I met Laird, instinctively, it felt like the place to be, because if you put it on paper, it really wasn't. And
Ah,
and so I think I had trusted myself for so long, and I think this is really important as a parent because I've said this a lot. Your children know things about their life that we do not. They have visions about their life, they have feelings about their life, we don't. And I'm a good example of that as well, where it's like the time that I had to trust myself. And that's not to say that Laird and I haven't gone through hard times, learning new skills, even having moments that it appeared we were not going to work it out and stay together. But the reason that the relationship is supportive is I feel like if my drive is to be, and I put it in quotes, healthy or strong, or even like, let's say the egotistical side of me, badass,
yeah.
it's, you learn pretty quickly that that actually is something from love. It is not from domination or exerting my will on you. That people who really are those things in their life are generally of service and looking for the way to resolution, not to combat or dominance. It almost feels counter culture, counter of what we're taught, what strong is, what
Right.
winning is. But I do like to win. And so the cooperation and the support comes from the fact that I want to win.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. But I think when you find that, healthy partnership, you see that it's like a team. One thing that I've noticed in society though is there's this masculine and feminine energy I feel we all embody, and I do think that there's in my opinion there's a yin and a yang, and it just fits together. And when females in particular try to dominate alpha males. You said this in your interview. You can't neuter an alpha male, and you shouldn't want to. You shouldn't want to be emasculating because you'll lose that respect anyway. Like, how can we rally women to not do that anymore? Like, you can still be a strong woman without having to bash it, especially if it's a good natured stand up man in your life.
Well, I think it's, it's interesting. So you have courting, which has like this sort of weird, almost like cat and mouse chasing game. But then if people decide, hey, like we're going to be together, I think you do switch, right,
Yeah.
over to this supportive thing. But we've had some interesting definitions culturally. So we say feminine energy. This is weak. No, that's not what that means. And masculine energy. This is misogynistic or bad or dominant. That's not it either. I think in its essence, in its pure form, they just represent different parts of all of us. And
Right.
for me, you hear people always talking about the supreme feminine and masculine. From what that sounds like to me is all the best traits. So nurturing and holding space for people, feminine. Okay, honorable, helpful, protective. Okay, masculine energy. Even like make a decision, certain things that are needed in all areas of life. And so I joke, and sometimes people don't think it's that funny, but I think it's true, is if women try to dominate or neuter men that are trying to show up, let's just assume that we're dealing with a human being that's trying to show up. I'm not talking about somebody who's trying to play games or, bullshit around. I'm talking about a
Right.
guy who's trying to do it, stand up and do it. It's sort of like if we crush them in all the ways, because it is in our nature to mother.
Yeah.
So I would start there. And that was made very
Mm.
clear by Laird to me many years ago. I had a mother, and unfortunately in his case, and he said to me, and she died. So what that did for me was liberate me from that role in his life, because it's a tendency. That's what we do. Are you hungry? Do you want to do that? You're talking too loud. That joke was inappropriate. So
Right.
for me personally, my experience was, oh, I'm not his mother. I'm his partner. And so with women, one thing I always say is, do you want to live with your brother or it's like, are you looking for a romantic dynamic? Are
Right.
you, and of course it slides, but for me personally, I was looking for somebody who could handle stuff I couldn't. I was looking to be, I wanted it to be romantic. And I wasn't going to do that if it was with my son or my brother.
Right.
And 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 it's also, I joke that if they changed in all the ways you'd want, then you wouldn't want, I probably want to have sex with them anymore.
Exactly. Exactly. You would just lose that
Yeah. So
feeling.
how do you get your point across in a way that's supportive and nurturing? Doesn't mean it can't be direct, doesn't mean you can't have boundaries. I certainly have all of those things. So it's you doing your best and showing up, and you will not change another person. You will only inspire them. And that's something women
Mm.
don't understand, I think, fully, because they don't teach us this. If you really live with a strong male energy who is trying to show up, the most powerful way we inspire them to the shift towards, whatever change we think is it more important. We do that through love and our best actions, not through force. It's never going to happen. And don't being scared. We act like that as females because we think we're going to get taken advantage of, we're going to get left behind, we're not going to be heard, and that's not true. If
Yes.
we keep working on ourselves and developing ourselves and being clear about what we want or what our boundaries, what works, what doesn't, I really think even through softness and conciseness, we can get there.
We can get what we want 100%. Absolutely. Tell us about your motherhood experience.
Well, my husband came with a very small child whose mother was in the picture, and I at
Mhm.
4 months old, and so I co-parented a very small, my first daughter, and that was a gift to understand that first of all, love is love, and meaning even though I wasn't her birth mother, like my Aunt Norette and Uncle Joe had done for me. I could be a person who provided love and example and just another parent. And then I had my next daughter 8 years later, my middle daughter, and then my youngest daughter, who is now a senior in high school. And how I parented 25 years ago versus how I parent today is very different. And I'll be honest, I have had great insecurity as a parent because of not being parented. I have a very strong and steely part of my personality. And so I'm always checking to make sure, am I being loving enough? And is it too tough? But because I didn't really have somebody who showed me how to set the boundaries, and the kids still felt loved. I felt neglected and something else. So the thing I've always danced around is like, is that too tough? Is that not tough enough? But what really helped me was learning my best shot was to be a good example, to love them and set boundaries. And something that nobody ever talks about is parental disappointment, which I think is so funny, because you think it's going to be one thing. You're going to do it all the ways that they didn't do it, and you're going to get it right, and everyone's going to love each other, and there's going to be communication, and family vacations are going to be awesome.
Yeah,
And
kumbaya.
right. And then you realize it's a complete shit show. You don't know what you're doing. They're all different. You're scared, you're mad. They're not how you thought they were going to be. They make choices you wouldn't do, especially as your kids get older. And then comes the word surrender, which is, oh, yeah, wait a second. This is their life. And so, how am I supposed to show up for them and set those boundaries and listen to them? And they're going to say things to you, especially when they become teenagers. And again, I have 3 daughters.
I know
They're
I
going
have
to
to brace
say
myself.
things
Oh
to you
God.
that are super uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And you're going to
Yikes.
want to react. You're going to want to fix it. You're going to want to do all those things. Can you just listen? Because the most important thing is that they're talking to you,
True.
and that the the arc on the story is long. And
Mm.
how do we remember all the things we went through, and we made it out, and we probably arrived at being okay adults? And
Right.
so my parenting style is a lot more maybe soft or easy than I thought it was going to be.
Wow. Wow. I love that. So, what question do you have for me?
What is it when you have twins and then a third child very close behind? Um, what were the ways that you preserved yourself within your physical practice and within your relationship and your professional life? Because there's no way, it's like there's no room. How were you able to preserve those little buckets during the kind of the craziest time of during that?
Oh my gosh. Well, I think the first was, I feel like I'm privileged, but we assembled our village, and that was what kept me going and sane. So we had a night nurse who I nursed all my kids for a year, but she would bottle feed one while I was nursing the other. And that tag team at nighttime allowed me to not be so sleep deprived, which was really great. And I had have a very supportive husband who wanted to leave his own imprint on the kids' lives, and I respect that because I think it was what I was yearning for in a marriage. I think something that I do lament is like my mom was like this mother hen, and she really had me and my sister under her wing and did everything. And all respect to my dad, but he's still there, and he's actually taking care of my mom who has dementia now. But he wasn't as present, and I knew I wanted to find a partner who would be. So that was huge. And then to create these like pockets of peace and space. I would go for walks. I would listen to walking meditation and guided meditations. I really love the Superhuman app. I use that all the time. And I dance. And that was something that
Mm.
was part of my childhood. I was trained in Indian classical dance, an art form called Kuchipudi. And it's funny, it's like something just drew me to get back into that after I had kids, and it was an outlet for me. And I'm glad that I still have it now. And I think, as my daughter's learning, she's 7. She's like, "Wow, I'm learning the same thing you learned when you were my age." And I was like, "Yeah, it's a full circle moment where I feel like I'm glad that I've just started training again. I can set that example that you don't have to have a passion or a hobby in life that like ends at childhood, because if that was something that gave you joy at one time, when you really are in the trenches and feel lost and feel like, who the hell am I? Like, I have lost my identity. When you return to that, you're like, ah, I'm found.
That's really beautiful and such an important point of stealing those moments, especially new parents. Or just all the roles, right? We're moms, we're
Yeah.
blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, I'm a wife. It's like, no, how about this spirit that's just dancing around and being within themselves? I think is such a really beautiful point.
Exactly. Exactly. And now on to our life lessons spike, which
Okay.
is, motherhood and fitness seem worlds apart, but you really embody so much of it, including mental fitness, so beautifully. So, what's been, one of the big life lessons that you're imparting to your kids now?
I don't expect my kids to be professional athletes, but I just know I talk to them about self-care being a way to function just better in all these other places. So like you said, in it, whether it's mental health or just being able to guide your life in the direction you're hoping to, having feeling good, having some mental kind of wherewithal or clarity. It doesn't mean we're sane every second. It just means I'm just using this as a tool to move in the direction that my heart wants to go,
Right.
and so that I'm not over, my emotions aren't taking over and pulling me or doing something like that. So I try not to make it such an intimidating thing where it's like, yeah, rah, you have to do this. It's like, no, this is just a tool. And I find less talking, more doing
Mm,
is really, like, for example, I try really hard not to gossip. And I
yeah.
know that my daughters, without me going, I try not to gossip. I think they recognize that. And
Yeah.
I always talk to them when they were young about, hey, listen, if you can avoid unnecessary emotional drama in general in your life, it will make it so much better. And of course, you
Totally.
got to get it, you got to bathe in there, and you got to get in fights with a bunch of girls and like do all that, and I think it's those things, and realizing they are not really listening. They are really watching. My children, it's like I respect them. And I even said, hey, if you see that I'm trying to manipulate you too, I have to play by the rules too. And so I think it's trying really hard to play fair. Even when I'm tempted, like I want to guilt this kid into, bending to my will. It's like play by the rules. And to be honest, I always say that the job is I don't know what I'm doing. I fail all the time, and every day I wake up and I'm going to show up and do my best, and that's like no other job in the world.
Yes. Yes. One thing that I have realized, and through many of my interviews, oftentimes it's adversity that's your best teacher. How do we really inculcate that?
I have no idea. I have
Yeah.
This is an ongoing, right? Because you bust your hump to try to build a life, and also I think it's exaggerated now with the phone and with everything else, right? Everything's on call. So I think it's releasing the idea that we're going to figure out how to put this adversity into their life. I think life will show them. it's just different than your path and my path. And that is so hard to accept as a parent. Um, so it's, again, this goes back to faith and being able to be there for them when they are going through that adversity, but trying to set it up, I think, is tricky. I don't know.
Yeah,
This has
yeah,
been an ongoing thing I've fretted about. Um, I don't know.
yeah. No, I know, and I think I guess it's also like we can't recreate the exact same problems we had, nor would we want to. I guess it's you know where the teachable moments are, and
Yeah.
then you make sure to like capitalize on those. That like, okay, this is a lesson here. It's a challenge. It's something you have to get through.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, you'll be stronger out when you come out the other side.
Yes, and I try. This is taking me a long time. I'm trying really hard not to filter with parent with my filter. So, for example, my
Oh,
youngest kills it in school, but my filter was athletics. That's what got me out of it. And so
mm-hmm.
I have had to really adjust and look at each person, each child individually and go, okay, how can I parent this person to the best of my ability, given who it seems that they are, at least today? And that has been the hardest thing for me.
Yes. Oh, I'm with you. Are you an early riser or a night owl?
I'm more of an early riser, but I don't wake up all like, yay, let's go. So I'm not a night owl, but when I wake up, I ease into it.
Yes. Do you have a daily ritual?
I do. I always say before I get out of my bed, I sort of set my emotional gear, because it's not like I fly out of bed every day. Like, I can't wait. I can't wait to train. I can't wait to take on all the details. I just remind myself that I'm fortunate, that I'm healthy, and all the great things that are in my life. And that when I put my feet on the floor, I'm going to move and speak and live in a way to the best of my ability. Believe me, I bomb that through the course of the day,
Yeah.
each day, and then I go for wins. Like, I make my bed right away. That's a win.
Mm,
I get
totally.
dressed and get organized. So when I leave my room, I look like a person who can take some stuff on. And then finally, the only other morning ritual I have is I do a greens and a reds drink before anything else. And then I sit with my husband for at least 15 minutes if we're in the same place, and have coffee and just talk like people, not like parents, not like husband and wife. We just go like, oh, I
Yeah.
read this thing and I saw this thing, and then dive into whatever chaos is waiting there.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. Is there a book that changed your life?
I've had a lot of books. I think, and I've talked about her quite a lot. I think somebody who has helped me shift my perspective in the most dramatic way in my adult life was certainly Byron Katie. She wrote a book called The Work, and the fact that she wasn't telling me what to do, she was giving me tools to ask myself if my narrative was true.
Mm,
That felt good and right for me, and it really also helped me surrender to all my default mechanisms that I have. But when I could figure out how to give myself a to go against some of my nature to deal with the situation the best I could in that moment, that was very, very helpful.
what was one moment where you trusted that mom sense that you have?
I do it a lot. Again, I'll just use my youngest daughter as an example. Is This is a kid who kids want to explore. And so, for example, I let her go on a trip to Europe with a friend, and there was an adult, but pretty much, she's a senior in high school. And I know my husband is like, and I said, the thing I know is that when you trust them, and also she has questions, and if she can go through those questions while she's living in our house and not at university,
Mm,
she's getting
mm-hmm.
through it faster. And so, as
Wow.
even the idea of like, you know, the things that we're all scared of, drugs and alcohol and sex and all these things. And the more I've empowered them and entrusted them, the more they know how to take care of themselves. And that is harder to do because you want to control at the top,
Yeah.
but it's in an appropriate and intelligent way, actually letting the reins out. has really proven to be the right strategy, at least in my family.
Yes, yes. Oh, that's brilliant. And then lastly, what is a mantra that you live by?
I've shared this before. Jim Quick says we're all walking around with a question. And my question is always like, what's the point? Like, what's the point of this conversation, of this trip, of this whole thing? But I've always asked myself, what's the right way to conduct yourself? What's the right way to respond? And the other one that shows up for me a lot is, well, why are you upset? So someone will like say something, or they have a different belief. And then rather than go into reaction mode, my mantra is more to observe myself and go like, well, why is this ruffling your feathers? And
Yeah.
take a look at that, because I'm at a place in my life, and if I'm not here by now, then it's going to be hard to get there, which is, what are all the things that are happening that are keeping me from unity? Because it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And if I can get that right just a few percentages of the time, it ends up being better. Yeah, listen, if people are are a little younger than I am, I want to just point out that whether it's, when you talked about the yin and the yang, right? So
Yeah.
within ourselves, with each other, we could go down rabbit holes within religions, within ideology around food, exercise, skin color. It's everywhere to be divided. And that
Right.
is where the torture is. So first start with ourselves and then try to go from there. And that for me is, if you talk to me about performance, why do I eat well and move? And, it's so I can even have a shot once in a while to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And it's the unifiers that you look for. Gabby, thank you so much for joining me on That's Total Mom Sense. And I really appreciate your wisdom and your candor.
Thank you for having me. And thanks for being so creative.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of That's Total Mom Sense. You can listen to the audio version wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for That's Total Mom Sense. You can learn more about my guests by logging on to www.thatstotalmomsense.com. Be sure to follow me on Instagram, where I'm most active on social media. My handle is @KanikaChadda-Gupta. And if you have ideas for show topics or guests you can't wait to have on the show, write to me at thatstotalmomsense@gmail.com. And lastly, please rate, review, and subscribe to That's Total Mom Sense if you haven't already. Thanks for being in my tribe.